Hi, my name is John Whitehead. I'm an executive and leadership coach, and welcome to my weekly video blog post. This is the 8th post on my series looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. This week, we take a look at addressing microaggressions. What are microaggressions? Well, words and behaviors can have harmful and long-lasting effects. They hold the power to make individuals feel as though they do not belong. Microaggressions are among these harmful acts, and they can be found everywhere, including the modern workplace. These words and behaviors are based on stereotypes and stigmatizations of race, sexual orientation, gender, and other marginalized groups. Microaggressions can take multiple shapes and forms and may often become overlooked in an organization. Ultimately, microaggressions will help to undermine a culture that supports diversity, inclusion, and equity. And these acts often lead to negative working environments in which groups may feel uncomfortable or insulted. The ability to recognize the reality of microaggressions in the workplace is a critical step towards creating a more inclusive and encouraging environment. So let's define microaggressions. Microaggressions are everyday insults, snubs, or actions of discrimination that negatively target a marginalized individual or group. They may be intentional or accidental and take the shape of jokes, questions, or casual remarks. A microaggression may be expressed verbally or through gestures and other nonverbal behaviors. Microaggressions communicate hostility and derogatory feelings. Although they may not always be of malicious intent, they can create a serious harm to the targeted individual. A microaggression may even be disguised as a compliment. Often these actions and insults reflect a lack of self-awareness and stem from implicit biases that we hold. The effects of microaggressions can build up and escalate into a larger conflict and damage to the person. Some examples of microaggressions that are commonly said include, "Where are you actually from? You're very articulate. What is your real name? Can I touch your hair? It is so inspiring how you've overcome your disability. I don't see color. I'm not homophobic. I have a gay friend. Your name is too difficult to say." Microaggressions can be placed in 3 categories: verbal, behavioral, and environmental. Every form will convey the negative messages that reinforces unequal power dynamics, resulting in an unwelcome or hostile work environment. So let's look at verbal. They're statements or questions that are harmful or stigmatizing to a marginalized group. Verbal microaggressions can be the use of derogatory terms, disrespectful comments, and racially insensitive jokes. Now let's look at behavioral. These are discriminatory actions or behaviors that are hurtful to a marginalized group. Behavioral microaggressions can take many forms, such as internal assumptions, displaying insensitive symbols or imagery, segregated workplaces, or failing to acknowledge an individual's presence or accomplishments. The third one is environmental, just subtle discriminations that occur in a physical or social environment. In other words, the physical environment is structured to create invalidation to certain groups. Environmental microaggressions include the ways that a workplace may fail in offering a welcoming environment, lack of accessibility, the naming of statues or structures, and pay gaps. So let's take a look at types of microaggressions. Microaggressions in a workplace can present themselves in many ways. There are times when they are both conscious and intentional, whereas other times they are simply a reflection of unconscious or implicit biases on a marginalized group. Regardless of the intent of the microaggression, they can leave serious and lasting effects. Microaggressions will affect a targeted individual's social acceptance and feelings of belonging, as well as validations of being valued. There are 3 different types of microaggressions, and they include microassaults. Now, microassaults include outright name-calling, slang, or slurs towards a particular group, as well as indirect put-downs, belittling and bullying behavior, groping or intimidating, The individual committing the microassault may not recognize the impact or seriousness of their behavior and may state that their discriminatory behavior was not intended to be offensive. Then there's micro insults. Now, these microaggressions are more subtle, in which the individual committing the microassault may not realize that they are insulting another individual. They may believe they are stating a compliment or acknowledging the target as an exception to a stereotype. These comments have underlying meanings and can serve as backhanded compliments or direct insults to the person receiving the comment. Micro insults can be intentional or unintentional and are often the result of an individual's own unconscious bias. Then there's micro invalidations. These microaggressions are blatant communications that discredit or dismiss a marginalized group's feelings or experiences of prejudice. They may state that the individual is being overreactive or too sensitive, leading to an invalidation of the experiences with this marginalized group. Micro-invalidations may be intentional or unintentional. Now, although microaggressions are small and subtle, they can have macro effects. Microaggressions can affect any marginalized group, creating harm and stress to the targeted individual. They may affect the receiver mentally, emotionally, and physically. Ultimately, microaggressions are acts of social exclusion. They reinforce ideas that contribute to the isolation of particular groups. Feelings of confusion, hopelessness, fear, anxiety, and anger will often arise. As microaggressions accumulate over time, they can significantly impact an individual's mental health and self-esteem. The threat of microaggressions can also impact a person's work performance. It's difficult to be successful in an environment that causes feelings of alienation and invalidation. They may prevent individuals in targeted groups from striving for a promotion or applying for jobs. With microaggressions being so common and impactful, it is only evident of the importance in being able to address these behaviors. The elimination of microaggressions in the workplace requires continuous efforts from every team member. The key is to address these behaviors in a way that focuses on a positive company culture. This includes conscious thinking and using respectful language. It's important to remember that the intent of the microaggression is not what matters, but rather the feelings of the receiver. In order to minimize microaggressions, there are some steps that each receiver and perpetrator can take. For someone who has experienced a microaggression, speak up and be direct. This will help the perpetrator understand the impact of their behaviors and can create a larger discussion on the subject. 2, don't internalize the microaggression. It is best to immediately counter the microaggression rather than internalizing it. 3, use I statements to address the perpetrator. I statements can clearly and directly help the perpetrator to understand the effect of the message. Separate the intent of the message from the impact. This involves shifting the topic from their intent to the impact of their words. Also, and finally, remember self-care. Find healthy ways to process your experience, whether it is reaching out to a trusted friend or professional. Now, for someone who has communicated a microaggression, listen and understand the individual's concerns. Allow the individual to express their feelings. Thank them for bringing the issue to your attention. Secondly, acknowledge and apologize. Since the impact of the message matters the most, it is important that this is addressed first. Third, don't make the situation about yourself. Avoid becoming defensive or attempting to explain yourself. But next, take responsibility. Be responsible when you have recognized that you have done or said something that has negatively impacted a marginalized group. And finally, seek awareness and knowledge. Take proactive steps to prevent this from occurring again. Educate yourself to become a better leader. Language is a powerful tool. The words and phrases that we use matter. It is important that we recognize the importance of our words and the impact that they hold. One of the key factors in fostering a diverse and equitable inclusion organization is to promote the use of inclusive language. Inclusive language is language that aims to include everyone. It is free from biases, limitations, stereotypes, and other forms of social exclusivity. A safe and successful environment requires us to think about how others will absorb the language that we use. Language can signify acceptance. We want to make sure that everyone feels accepted, acknowledged, and respected. Inclusive language is an ongoing journey of learning in which active listening and feedback can help to guide us. When it comes to talking to others, it's important to focus on the person rather than their characteristics. Using inclusive language will help to create a space in which employees feel comfortable bringing up topics such as race, disability, or gender. There are many ways to make language more inclusive, including using gender-neutral terms. This is language that does not identify a gender and avoids biases towards a particular sex. For example, humankind instead of mankind, or chairperson instead of chairman. Use person-first language. Always put the individual before a disorder, disability, or diagnosis, as they do not define the individual's identity, right? Do not use someone's cultural, race, disability, or identify as a reference. So never use someone's traits as a reference during a conversation or introduce somebody by describing the traits they tend to marginalize, because that tends to marginalize the individual. Choose accepted and widespread terminology. Always be mindful of terms that are related to one's ethnicity, race, culture, etc. There are many terms that have roots in discrimination and racism. Use neutral or preferred pronouns. Use pronouns that a person prefers to be associated with. When uncertain about an individual's preferred pronouns, use gender-neutral pronouns like they, theirs, them. Avoid insensitive language. Many common phrases exist that are insensitive to an individual who is impacted by a medical condition. Be mindful and consider alternative terms. For example, missed opportunity instead of blind spot, person who is hard of hearing instead of hearing impaired, or ridiculous, outrageous instead of crazy. So thank you for watching this series on DEI. If you would like to reach out to me about this topic or other topics such as soft skills development, see my contact info at the end of this video. Thanks.